is
We need to record.
now Gisele is from
Mhm.
California, and uh, again, she'll be giving this first talk. We'll start here in just a minute or so and introducing her. And this will be on the markers for mental and emotional illness, part one. Uh, Gisele gave a talk last year and it was amazing. And just want to say about Gisele, she is grace embodied. So I hope you all will just sit back and relax. And Gisele, why don't you take it away?
Thank you, Christopher, for your introduction. And I'm hoping everyone can hear me clearly. And welcome. Good morning. Welcome to Astrological Markers of Mental and Emotional Illness. This is part one of a two-part series. Part two is tomorrow morning. It's great to be here today with all of you at this most trying time. I hope you are all well and safe, and at least we can meet virtually for our conference. At least we can take a break from the concerns that are on our minds and focus on what inspires us in vibrational astrology. So I'm going to go, it may be an hour and 15 minutes, it may be an hour and 10, it may be an hour and 5. You know, if you do have questions and there's no way to ask me during the conference, please, you can contact me afterwards and ask me anything that you would like. So I'm going to go right in and start. Oops, that's not what I meant to do. Sorry. There we go. Okay. All right. So this presentation constitutes my first foray into astrological research. I have never done astrological research before, and I didn't expect to encounter and experience what I did. Today's presentation is going to give you everything that you would need to know that set us up, that set David and me up to find the results that we found for this research in bipolar disorder. And but I think that even in today's presentation, which are the preliminary stages of the research, you're going to already start to put things together. So this is a work today that was a collaboration with David. Actually, when we get to tomorrow's session, it was David and I really worked as a team to put together the final stages of the qualitative analysis that we needed for the signatures for bipolar. Today, and I'm going to show you all the work I did from 2018 through 2019, and David, without a doubt, helped me with that. But before I start, you know, I wanted to tell you something personal. I thought that doing research was going to be very analytical, very dry, very heady. That's what I thought when I thought about astrological research and what David does. Well, I want to tell you that I have never had such an emotional experience preparing for a presentation the way I did this one. I was on such a high, and by the way, I don't have bipolar disorder. I have other things, but I don't have bipolar. But I was on such a high at times that I thought I was going to jump out of my skin. And then I would go really down low into these places of such despondency that at one point I told David, you know what, forget it. I don't even want to do this. And if it hadn't been for David and his experience talking me through what it means to do what it means to do research in general, and how it is possible to get excited but also you have to be able to be dispassionate. You have to be able to step back. And I have to honestly tell you the one of the reasons why I was on such a high and low is because I'm overly invested. Now I'm working on it. I really am trying to get that research mentality. And I hope to get there. And everything I'm going to show you today is very logical. I'm not going to show you anything emotional. It's going to be very logical, step by step. But I hope that by the time I get to the end of tomorrow's presentation, that you will understand the reasons for my being so overly invested. Okay, let's start at the beginning. What is the purpose of this lecture? The purpose is to describe the planetary and vibrational patterns that people who have bipolar disorder have in common in their birth charts. I will explain how research results were found starting today with early stages of qualitative research, all the way to tomorrow, where we'll talk about the quantitative analysis of the Gauquelin database of 912 people who were diagnosed with bipolar disorder. I'm going to show and describe the statistical research that I originally conceived and then David refined using planets and vibrations in 7 astrosignatures. I'll show you the big, gigantic astrosignature that combined all of them and the results, and then propose future research that we would need in order to replicate our results and thereby validate the model that we created. So I'm going to go through the stages of this research. So the purpose being, I want you to see exactly what happened and how it happened. And that also for you to know that at every stage, I had no idea that I was going on to the next stage. When I started exploratory research in 2018 with bipolar disorder, it was actually for the UAC conference in 2018. And my presentation was an analysis of 3 or 4 of my patients, only one of whom had bipolar disorder. But somehow out of that preparation, I started to get interested and look at some of the vibrational patterns. Okay. Then I'm going to take you to the next stage. Again, I didn't know I was going here when David suggested that I do case study analyses, qualitative analyses, in 2009, right here at the Vibrational Astrology Conference last March. I did that of 25 of my patients who had a number of different diagnoses, including bipolar disorder. And then finally, we're going to bring you more up to date starting in July of 2019 all the way to now, focusing on the statistical research in bipolar disorder, where David and I worked as a team, each providing our own expertise, and David fine-tuned the analysis of the final bipolar disorder signatures. And what we found is a model with very high statistical significance that now is ready to be tested in future research. So let me go, look, I wanted to show you. You don't need to memorize this. You don't need to study this. I just want you to see that, yes, there are 7 signatures. We're going to go into this more tomorrow in detail. But as you can see, there are 7 sub-signatures, and the very last signature on the bottom is all 6 combined into the 7th signature. Each signature has like a lead planet that represents one of the mood states of bipolar disorder, which has several mood states, of several variations on mood states. So for every signature, there's a planet that takes a lead and a vibration that is the vibration that is the most prominent in that particular signature. So you just get a glimpse of this when you get your PDFs, even of today's presentation. You'll be able to see it right up front. So we'll come back to it. But before I even talk about anything else, let's talk about bipolar disorder, then we can go on to other things. So lots of you probably are familiar with bipolar disorder, at least somewhat. Maybe some of you have bipolar disorder or know people who have bipolar disorder. It was called manic depression until the 1980s, and then it was changed in the DSM to the name bipolar disorder. So it was known as manic depression, as I said, until the 1980s. And when you look in the Series 3 database, the Gauquelin database, is the manic depression, because he put his material together early on when it was still called manic depression. So it's primarily defined by a cluster of symptoms defined by the DSM. Today it's the DSM revision number 5. The DSM is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Emotional and Behavioral Disorders. And now this is a diagnostic and statistical manual that everybody in the counseling field, everybody, psychiatrists, clinical psychologists, research psychologists, marriage family therapists like I am, clinical social workers, we all have to know this. It's a differential diagnosis guide, so it allows you to make diagnoses based on certain criteria. What's important, I just want you to know, has nothing to do with treatment. This is nothing to do with how we actually interact and treat people. But what's important for you to know, because it does relate to what I felt was very important for this research, is that there has to be a cluster of symptoms that are severe enough to meet medical necessity, which means that the individual is rendered functionally incapacitated in at least 2 to 3 major areas of life. And while the truth is that functionally incapacitated occurs on a continuum, what that really means is, for instance, in the major area of employment, you just cannot get to your job. You lose your job because you can no longer go. You can no longer take care of yourself. You can no longer bathe. You can no longer dress. You can't eat. You stay in the same clothes. You stay inside. By the way, I have 2 people right now, and this is their level of functional disability. And 3 is emotional cut off from other people. You sever relationships. So most of us who work as psychotherapists have people in our practice who would meet this criteria. There are different kinds of bipolar. I'll talk about that in just a minute. And yes, there are differentiations. But what's important, again, for this research is that you know that it doesn't matter which bipolar you have. They all are going to share the same symptoms. The differences are in intensity, duration, and sometimes the number of symptoms that are required to make the diagnosis. Bipolar disorder is lifelong. It may go into remission. For some people it does. But the individual has a propensity for experiencing a vulnerability to bipolar disorder during stressful times throughout life. And the depression part of it is extremely, extremely severe. Very few people will come into our practices in the manic phase. You know, when you're in the manic phase, it's a feel-good experience. You write the next symphony, you stay up all night, you have a blaze of ideas, you really can go and get things done. Your imagination runs wild. You know, you don't need psychotherapy at that point. It's when you cycle back down, and that is so severe. That's when people will come in. It is important that it be diagnosed by a specialist. So bipolar 1 is the worst. It's the most extreme. This is the kind of diagnosis that usually requires hospitalization, because during the manic phase, there can be psychotic features. And during the depressive stage, often the suicidal ideation can transition into an actual plan for suicide. And even though you'll see that the requirements are that the mania lasts for at least 1 week, the depression for 2, this is usually a very long-term episodic cycle that can last a year or 2 years. Bipolar 2 is often what we see in our practices. The only difference is that it's a hypomania rather than a mania. Hypomania is a lesser version of the full-blown mania, but believe me, the self-destructive part of it can be just as severe. But we're likely, this is what walks into my practice, is bipolar 2 major depression. Cyclothymia I've also had in my practice for at least 2 years. There are numerous periods of hypomanic episodes followed by the full-out major depressive episode. And it doesn't quite meet the full criteria. And what I mean by that, and we don't go like, does the person need this? No, you know when you see the person, when you've worked with the person, it's bipolar. If it walks and talks like bipolar, it's bipolar. The difference is that cyclothymia, or rapid cycling bipolar, actually can cycle around either every other day, every week, every month, every 2 months, and it's quite a disturbing diagnosis. Bipolar NOS, it simply means the same thing. It's bipolar, but it doesn't meet every single criteria that you need. But it still walks and talks like bipolar. Okay, here's the question. How would I have known when I started doing this research that the definition of planetary combinations correlate with the DSM symptoms for bipolar disorder? How would I know? Well, here I'm going to tell you why. Because I know bipolar disorder, number one. I know what it looks like, what it feels like. I know the symptoms. Number two, I understand the meanings of the planetary combinations in vibrational astrology, the same meanings that you all know from studying with David. And we know that some of the meanings of those planetary combinations, we either know or we will know, correlate with the symptoms of either the manic episode or depressive episode of parts of bipolar disorder. Now, the other thing is that the meanings of these planetary combinations in vibrational astrology were well established well before I even took a look at this, years before. When I first started studying vibrational astrology, David was already talking about propensity for emotional distress or problems. I remember him talking about Moon, Saturn, Pluto combinations, the severity of that, the likelihood of that originating in early trauma. He talked about the propensity of combinations in certain vibrations of planets with Sun and Neptune, Moon and Neptune, Saturn and Neptune, Mars, Neptune, Saturn, Uranus, Saturn, Pluto. So he was talking about this well before I even took a look at bipolar disorder. So, it wasn't that hard for me to start looking and seeing, that is a bipolar disorder symptom. Okay. Just so you know, you don't have to study it, but just important for you to know that in a manic or hypomanic episode, you need 3 of these criteria. You see how many criteria there are? You only need 3. Now, it's not going to look very discrete. It's all mushed together in the personality. But it is important for you to know that you only need 3, because one person can present with a lot of self-inflation, high-risk activity, and difficulty sleeping. Another person can be very talkative, can't sleep at all, and has racing thoughts. So what I'm saying is you can get different mixes. It's not everybody's going to present with all of these and look the same way. But when you know the disorder, you know the feel of it. And then it is followed by a distinct period of bipolar depression, which is major depression. Major depression is very severe, but there is something about the bipolar major depression that is even, to me, for me, it is even harder. And here are the symptoms. So when I'm doing the research, I have to know that what I'm looking at with planetary combinations, they have to match up some of these symptoms. Now, we're not going to get increased or decreased appetite as a planet. I'm not going to correlate a pattern in vibrational astrology with every single one of these symptoms, but you're going to see how many of these symptoms do correlate with some of what we already know as the vibrational and planetary patterns. So here it is. You need 5 or more of these symptoms. The suicidal ideation with or without a plan is always presents with this form of depression, and this is a potentially fatal illness. So Michelle and Francois Gauquelin were the ones who put together the database of 912 people with bipolar disorder that's in the Series 3 database. You'll see it's under manic depression. And they did archival research, and they did it on lots of mental and emotional illnesses. And Michelle Gauquelin died in 1991. What we know, I think important for the research, is that, again, even though there are different kinds of bipolar disorder, the symptoms of depression and the symptoms of mania are going to look the same. The differences are in duration, in intensity, and sometimes the number of symptoms that you need to make the diagnosis. At the time that the Gauquelins actually did collect the data, it was, I believe through what I learned, it was back in the early 70s. Also important for you to know when we're looking at the database is that the same diagnosis for bipolar disorder called manic depression existed then, and it's the exact same criteria. So there's nothing different about the criteria that would have the criteria that was used for the diagnoses of these 912 people that were collected in the 1970s as a diagnosis that's made today. If any of you want to look at Cura, this is a very sophisticated astrological research center from Europe, and best astrological researchers participate here. And Michelle Gauquelin, it was known to have, they have all of his data on this site, all the data that he collected, even on emotional and mental illnesses aside from bipolar disorder. Okay, I'm going to start showing you how I put this together starting in 2018, and this is exploratory research that I did for the UEC conference. And at this conference, I was focusing on 3 patients. Only one had bipolar disorder, but that's what I became interested in. That's what I started to look at. And this is what I did. I went into series, at that time it was series 2. It still had this panel. If you go to series 3, you'll see it, the exploratory research section. And what I did was I pulled up this screen. That's what happens if you hit exploratory research. Now let me explain. When you see my category 1, that's my category 1. I had to isolate out the 912 people in the Gauquelin database that had manic depression. That's what I called my category 1. Then I highlighted harmonic, you'll see down below with the red arrow, And what I did from there is what I wanted to do is I wanted to see if I looked at every single dyad of every planet, which two planets would score the highest elevation on the graph of vibrations, which you're going to see in a minute. I didn't include the ascendant, descendant nodes or any of the asteroids. Just wanted to look at the planets because that's what we were studying, what I had studied in vibrational astrology. I'll show you right now what I'm talking about when I'm talking about a graph. So this is what that exploratory research will take you to is a graph of all the vibrations from the natal chart, number 1, all the way through 180. Now, at the time, I knew and understood the vibrations all the way through vibration number 31 and multiples thereof. So you'll see how I'm using multiples of some of these vibrations, but what I want you to do right now, because you don't have to understand every little piece, but visually, you can see Moon Saturn is like jumping right up. It is high. So this is the first one that I looked at among a few that just leaped out. And right away, you can see elevations. I don't have a cursor, so you'll just have to go by the black circles around the elevations around. Now I'm going to focus on the vibrations that I knew had very deep meanings. So 7, 8, look how high 10 is. So 7 is the vibration of the quality of introspection, the very internalized quality of life, it is a very psychological vibration, highly focused, highly disciplined, but it's where we go deep inside. 8, where our basic challenges and drives are. 10, multiple of 5. We're going to start seeing this with bipolar disorder because we're starting to look at signals of the flow, the creative flow for some bipolar. But what's important in this? 7, 8, 16, a multiple of 8, and then we move right over to 28, multiple of 7, and then we get also 29. Now 29 didn't show up that high in every way and every single place, but it's very interesting to think about 29 because it is the vibration of the kind of optimist, the futurist, and there's a high to that. So, but Moon, Saturn with 7, 8 prominence leaped out at me, and I thought, okay, what are we looking at here? Is this a depression combination? Now, that's what I thought. It's all exploratory, but I thought, before I go there, why don't I take a look at a control group? I didn't know that much about research, but I knew, hey, they do control groups. So, before you show this at a conference, you better do some kind of comparison. Well, fortunately, there was this other group called Other Psychological Problems in the Gauquelin database. Oh, wonderful. Other psychological problems compared to bipolar, my category 1. Let's look at it. My other psychological problems is a database of over 1,300 charts. So I thought that's great. Oh goodness, let's look what comes up if I do Moon Saturn for that. But before I do, I want to show you what it means to set up a control group. Again, we're going to come back to this tomorrow, but you need to know that there really are different ways to do this. The first way has to do with determining the random distribution of planets. In the previous screen, if I selected daily transit distribution, I'm going to show you it in a minute, what it will show us is how often the Moon and Saturn are naturally in a 7 or 8 vibration during the same range of birth dates as the 912 people with bipolar disorder. And actually I did do a little screenshot here so you can see that everything in blue represents the normal relationship of the moon to Saturn during that time frame of the birth dates of everyone in the manic depression database. But look how high um, the red verticals are. They extend past the blue. So that's verifying for me that yes, that's not normal. That's high for this particular group. And here it is if you do want to look at it. All you need to do where the green arrow is click on the daily distribution of transits, and that will give you the information that you need to know, whether it was kind of like normal for them to be high or whether what you're finding is, oh boy, that's going higher. So the second way to create a control group, we're going to look at this tomorrow. It is the most difficult way to do a control group. You're coming up against a very tough control group, and you can do it right in the Sirius program. It mixes up the dates and times and places of everyone in the group that you're studying so that you come up with a very specific but highly randomized set of charts that you're going to compare your category with. Talk about it more tomorrow. But the third way that I chose at the time, 2018, I thought, wow, I've got these 1,300 people in other psychological problems. What am I going to find? Let's just go back so you get a visual. Look at the moon Saturn for bipolar disorder. Now, take a look at this for over 1,300 people with other psychological or physical problems. Are we seeing any elevations in 7, 8, 16? Okay, we see a little bleep on 18. That's another kind of vibration altogether. It's not associated with major challenges in life in the same way. Do we see anything jumping up the way we do here? Can you see just visually the difference? Okay, so I thought, whoa, that's interesting. Let's continue. Let me keep looking here. What else am I going to find? But why would Moon Saturn even occur to me to be related to depression? Here we go. This is how I'm starting to put it together. Look at clinical symptoms of depression. You can read it for yourself. Negative, depressed mood, lack of energy, diminished self-esteem, social withdrawal, sense of disconnection. What does Moon Saturn mean for us in vibrational astrology? Well, on the most positive end, if meanings have a continuum, on the most positive end, we're going to see someone who's very severe. I'm sorry, who is very authentic. I meant to say sincere. But as you start to cut back on the glitz and the overlay of emotion and lack of sincerity, as you start to pull back, you're going to end up way down on the other end of the continuum, and you're going to get a void of emotional expression. You're going to get a numbness, a disconnect from self and others. You're going to get a lack of emotional engagement and a tendency to loneliness. So you're going to get such a cutback that you are cut back. And this is one of the major symptoms of depression, is that the person feels lonely, disconnected, sometimes unable to even feel themselves. They're numb to the world, can't feel joy. Well, I thought, let's look Saturn, Neptune. Okay, what's interesting here? Does anybody see this right away? Look at those sevens. We are looking at right across the board multiples of 7, the internal, introspective, very deep, psychological, vibration, 7, 14, 21, 42. Can you see that? Now, isn't that other vibrations aren't standing out? We've got a 35, which is 7 times 5. Okay, we've got 7 with Saturn, Neptune. So let's just first take a look at the other psychological disorders groups so you can get a visual of what does a comparison look like. Okay, do we see anything in 7? No. We see a little bleep in 13. We see nothing in 31. We got a little bleep in 31. You know, it's going to be high in some ways, but let me go back visually. Just look visually. Look at the 7s. And now, why would 7 ring out for me? Why? Because, okay, we know that 7 is very deep, very psychological, very introspective. We do see depression in 7. And why would Saturn Neptune start to feel like another symptom of depression? Symptom of depression, persistent negative, depressed, pessimistic mood. Saturn Neptune casts out the glitz and glamour to go for the real thing, the real spiritual experience. But in doing this can go all the way to an extreme and become cynical, skeptical, pessimistic, hopeless. These are the symptoms of depression. The negativity, the cynicism. Saturn Uranus just leaps out. I don't even need to show you all the different vibrations, but it's all 7 and 8. It's all, the whole thing is 7 and 8, all the way down. Oh my gosh, let's just take a look at the others. You see anything? 8 is kind of high. Look at that. Look at that. Oh boy, this is kind of interesting. This is very interesting. Okay, why would I think Saturn-Uranus would be just one more to add to the list of depression? Saturn-Uranus separates out others, inclines to not follow rules. It feels extremely uncomfortable and irritable, and it feels very separate from the social fabric of life. And one of the clinical observations, I have to tell you, of bipolar disorder in the depressive episode is irritability, irritability, discomfort, discomfort. The person does not feel connected at all. So, excuse me, I put this into another symptom in the depressive phase of bipolar disorder. Now, I want you to know, this is all just my thinking. I'm just thinking, I'm just exploring. I'm just trying to kind of like go, that's interesting. Jupiter, Uranus again, jumping right up. Now, what I want you to see with Jupiter, Uranus, take a look at those 11s. 11, 22. It does have 23, which actually is a version kind of similar to 11, but I want you to focus on all the 11. 11, 30, 22, 33, 44, 55, 66, 88, and even if we go down 99. Oh my gosh, 11, 11 unstable. Jupiter, Uranus, wild, wildly excited. Whoa, whoa, let's take a look at other psychological problems. Do we see any 7s? We got 11. We got a 13. Okay, that's interesting. And we don't have anything like what we've got here, do we? No, nothing. No, nothing. Okay, let me continue with the Jupiters because now I'm on a kind of Jupiter high. And Jupiter, Neptune, whoa, is that ever big, right? We know. It's big. It's big imagination. It's I'm going to have the biggest adventure in the whole world. And what are we seeing? 7, 10, 13. 13, I want to go beyond. I want to be the most. I want to be the biggest, the best. 21, another version of 7. 25, right up there with the creative flow, that imagination, as we all know. Again, this is just exploratory, but we do know that many of our major creative artists have a huge imagination, and often, not always, but some of them have bipolar disorder. But look at 88. So we're getting a variation. 7, 13, 21, 25, 88. Well, what is this going to look like with the other psychological problems? Well, maybe a little bit. Go back. You see that? Nothing on 7, nothing really on 8. 25, no, 36, multiple of 12. It isn't there. It isn't there. Okay, Jupiter, Uranus, Jupiter, Neptune. I'm starting to think, oh gosh, this is sounding like mania or hypomania. Look at the symptoms of mania or hypomania. Self-inflation, 13th vibration, grandiosity, Jupiter, Neptune, 13th vibration, decreased need for sleep, hyperactivity, elevated mood, excess involvement. Jupiter, Uranus, and vibrational astrology, what do we know? Excitability, high, impulsivity, especially with Mars. What do we know about Jupiter and Neptune in vibrational astrology? Big, big. Self-inflation, grandiosity, maybe in the 13th vibration, elevated mood, big dreams, big adventure. And I continued with 2 more of the dyads that just jumped out at me. Moon, Jupiter, again, strong elevation in the 7. 7 times 7 and 7 times 4. It's just strong. Let's look at the control group. Well, okay, it does come up high in the 8. That's true. It does. Well, let's look at Mars, Jupiter, 8, 11, 32, multiple of 8, 33, okay, 55. And in the control group, no, go back. See? No. Control group has 19 high. Okay, so why is all of this speaking to me as also these are symptoms of manic phase? Because what do we know about Moon Jupiter? Just don't even think about bipolar. What do we know? Big emotions, open, expansive mood states. And what do we know about Mars Jupiter? Taking action, doing things in a big way. Let's do it, let's do it, let's do it. And if you add any other planet to that, like Uranus, you're going to get hyperactivity. You're going to get this. So I'm going, okay, this is starting to be so interesting. And then the end of 2018 after ULEC, I started to recognize that there were certain combinations of planets that were showing up big time in my initial exploratory research. Now I thought, okay, I left it there. I didn't think any more about it. I went on, lived my life. David talked to me in end of 2018, 2019. He said, Gisele, what about doing a case study analysis for your 2019 Vibrational Astrology Conference? I thought, okay, and David was great. He even, helped me with this, but I picked out the cases. David did some analysis. I did some analysis. These people had a number of different disorders. They didn't just have bipolar disorder. But again, I started to look at the bipolar disorder. Again, I started to look at it. Now, here's what's so important about research. What I did in 2019 is called case study analysis. What we all do, me included, we all do, when we give presentations, most of us, is we use anecdotal evidence. We pick charts that support our theory. Okay, but that's not going to lead to evidence of anything. That's where we cherry pick charts to support what we want to support. No, case analysis is not based on any prior theory. I don't have any theory right now, or did I have any theory? I just wanted to observe the charts of people who in real life, they have these severe problems, and I just wanted to look, what are the patterns here? What's coming up here? And case study analysis is what has a much better chance of being confirmed later in research that develops a model that can later be confirmed in hypothesis testing. So here we go. Here's my case study analysis taken from the bipolar patients in my 2019 presentation, and I added in people who are in the public domain. This is my first client. I did show her last year. You can see, look, the natal charts. Number one on the vibrational pattern graph, you're not seeing anything, which proves that you can only get here where we got through vibrational astrology. Now I'm going to show you, this was someone who had bipolar 1. She was in and out of hospitals her whole life because bipolar 1 is that severe. This is the 7th vibration. Again, I'm going to start looking at 7, 8, 11, those three, and multiples of them. Just staying with them. That's what I wanted to see. What is coming up here? Look at this kite pattern. Right in the 7th vibration, we are seeing Moon, Saturn, Pluto. There can be nothing more severe for depression that has this ongoing hold on someone that won't let go. And that is the nature, by the way, of the depression part of bipolar. It doesn't let go. And it is severe, it's compulsive in terms of the internal negativity. The focus is a Neptune focus, but I wanted you to see the Moon, Saturn, Pluto, because that started to leap right up. Many of us know Moon Pluto is also, a kind of karmic pattern, reaches into the depth of the past, and can be also a signal of how early trauma can contribute to to any emotional disorder. Okay, let's continue. Here's her 88th vibration. Lots of times what I'm doing is I'm combining either 7 or 8 with 11 because I want to catch both at the same time. Do we see something interesting here? Look at the isotrap. Also on one side, Saturn, Moon, Pluto, Venus gets pulled in. But look at the other side of the isotrap, Jupiter, Neptune. So we get one chart that combines the unstable vibration of 11 with the 8 basic challenges in life, and we're getting one chart that has 2 polarities, a depressive end, and if we are going to prove that Jupiter Neptune is the big high of the manic phase, there it is all in one. I'm just looking again. I'm not so much drawing conclusions, but I'm looking and seeing this is getting interesting. This is really interesting. Okay, another patient. This is as severe as the other patient that I just showed you, also during her life, in and out of hospitals the whole time. And the only thing that helped her was electroshock therapy. So this is, just so you know, not to have preset ideas about certain kinds of treatment. This woman was not able to be treated with a mood stabilizer, with anything. Mood stabilizers are what you give for bipolar mania and bipolar depression. Anyway, in and out of hospitals her whole life. You can see kind of a little bit in the natal chart, but nothing in our graphs is showing the natal chart as being the indicator of these tight vibrations. Now look at her 11th vibration. What do we see here in a grand trine? Moon, Saturn, Neptune. This is someone who had many suicidal plans. Okay, this is very intense. Now it's very interesting because if I look further, I can also see some other patterns here. I can see a Jupiter-Neptune pattern, but I wanted you to see the repetition of the Moon, Saturn, Pluto. But you can really start to see these kinds of combinations of these elevated states and these depressive states. There's nothing more severe than that Moon, Saturn, Pluto. Here I'm combining. Often I combine 3 times 11 or 6 times 11, and there's one reason. Because 3 is easy. 6, a multiple of 3 is easy. And to me, it depicts how easy someone can go right from the high to the low, and that's exactly how it happens. It is not like a slow transition from high to low or low to high. These people are walking down the street and bango, they're in the next mood state. So here we have in the 33rd, this is a multiple of 11, the unstable vibration. Look at that. Pluto, Moon, again, Venus, interestingly, comes in, and Saturn. You get a repetition. Look how Neptune opposes Jupiter. Again, the bigness, and pulls in the Sun and Mercury. If we kept going higher, I bet that Uranus and Neptune would start to combine. This is another patient of mine. This is someone I'm currently treating. This is a 66. Again, I told you 3 or 6. Whoa, right there, right there. And huge manic states that he goes into, and then huge depressive states. Now look at this as a grand cross. Uranus, actually, it's Uranus, Saturn, Mars, and Venus. But we see how Neptune gets pulled into the Jupiter, how Mars gets pulled into the Uranus. Actually, if you look at it long enough, you can just see there's a grand trine with Neptune, Uranus. Anyway, yeah, okay, you got it. Now, 29. I wanted to show you 29. It doesn't come up all the time, but because 29 is such a optimist and futurist and loves to look ahead in the future, and this is where this fellow's depression starts crushing down. It kind of takes down this high. Look at that Saturn, Mars, Uranus. First of all, look at the kite in this. So it's a combination of the high of the whoa, the discoveries of the future, wow. And then you've got this irritability, this discomfort, this this impulsivity of that pattern. Look at that, Saturn, Mars, Uranus. Neptune to Saturn, the cynicism of Neptune to Saturn. We do get Sun, Neptune, interesting. So I'm starting to correlate all kinds of different things when I see this. Again, this is still exploratory. Just to show you Carrie Fisher in the public domain. Show you quickly. You can see 11. What do we see? There we go. Sun, Saturn, Uranus. We also have a pattern, Jupiter, Neptune, Pluto. You'll start to see this more. You can look at it in your PDFs. Here's this, as I said, I start to multiply 7 or 8 by 11. What are we seeing? Saturn, Mars, Sun opposing Pluto, and look at that, Moon, Jupiter to Uranus. I just thought I'd go up on the 11 times 11, Mars, Uranus, Jupiter, Uranus, Neptune, Mars. Actually, this looks like it's almost, if we did it more, we'll probably end up with like a grand cross. We can kind of see it emerging. But we can see the Jupiter and Saturn and Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, we can all see them mixing together. Winston Churchill, look at that isotrap in his 8th vibration. Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Sun, Jupiter. So these are some of the outstanding planets in tight coordination that we're observing in bipolar disorder, especially in 7, 8, 11, and multiples thereof. And there we go, Moon, Pluto, Sun to Uranus and Saturn. I told you 33 is one I use. Here's Demi Lovato. I'm going to just, I know I'll go to the hour and 15. I may have 5 minutes left over, but 20 more minutes will do fine. Okay, I want you to see your 13 because 13 starts to show up. 13 is the vibration where it's, I need to be big, I am big, I'm going to punch through the norm, I'm going to be special, I am special, and probably a lot of these people actually are special. They really are. But here we go. Look at that 13. A musician, 13th vibration with bipolar disorder. Um, Pluto, Saturn, Sun, Neptune. So right away, here with the Sun, I'm seeing the combination of Saturn, Neptune, Pluto. I'm seeing that grand trine involving other planets, but very interesting. Mercury, that's interesting how Mercury gets so strongly pulled in to the Sun Saturn. So I'm starting to think, okay, the moon also gets pulled in to Saturn, but that Mercury is getting pulled in. I'm just starting to think, and that also thinking that Uranus and Jupiter, if I do it at a higher octave, is probably going to be conjunct. And I just fooled around. And yes, at the 78, I just started doing that 6 or 3 times the vibration. And there it is. Jupiter, Uranus, conjunct. And look what we see at the bottom. You're getting one chart with this excitability, elevation, big, and then you get Moon, Mercury, Saturn, Sun. And I'm really starting to notice the moon, not just the moon, but Mercury and Saturn. Okay, and that opposes Mars. All right, just looking. But after looking at all of these, and I looked at others as well, these are the combinations from my exploratory research that are starting to jump out. Sun, Moon, Saturn, Pluto. Sun, Mercury, Saturn, Pluto. Sun, Jupiter, Moon, Jupiter, Mars, Jupiter, Neptune, Saturn, Saturn, Uranus, Jupiter, Neptune. 8, 7, 11, 11 base vibrations. I showed you how I did the multiples of 11 with 33, 66 when I multiplied by 3. And also 77 and 88. And then the 13 vibration, because we already know 13 wants to push beyond. And if 13 can push beyond, that's a high. That's a big high. And I'm starting to think, actually, I didn't think at the end of 2019. I didn't make the exact that, that looks like the very same thing I came up with the year before. I didn't actually start to put all of this together until, I'll tell you, until July of this past year. But really, these are the same combinations that I saw in 2018. I don't know, do we really need more? I mean, do we need more to try to go to, statistical analysis? Uh-huh, we do. We really do. We're not there yet. We're going to keep going. I was going to keep going because here in July of 2019, I realized something. I realized that I started to have repetitive combinations. And I thought, I'm going to go into this other feature in Sirius. I am going to look at the midpoint and harmonic patterns because those are going to show me 3 planets together. And not only are they going to show me how 3 planets together score on the elevations of vibrations, but it's going to show me 3 octaves of specific vibrations. So it's going to show me, here you see my category 1, that's the 912 people with bipolar disorder. And then it's going to show me how strong or what planets are the strongest in the 3 octaves of 7, 7, 14, 21, 3 octaves of 5, 5, 10, 15, 3 octaves of 8, of 11, and of 13. So I said, I'm going to look at this. And I'm out of what came up is this huge, 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 huge list. I said, I'm only going to look at the first 4 or 5, 6. I'm going to see what combinations are jumping out. And I did the midpoint analysis too, but to conserve time for today, I'm just going to show you what came up strong for the harmonic pattern analysis because it's virtually the same for the midpoint analysis. And here we go. I'm going to show you what came up in the seventh vibration for 7, 14, 21. Let's just look at the first ones. These are the ones that, again, this list goes on and on and on and on and on. Sun, Mercury, Pluto was the highest in 14. Jupiter, Uranus, Pluto. Mercury, Saturn, Pluto. Jupiter, Neptune, Pluto. Sun, Mercury, Jupiter, Jupiter, Uranus, Neptune, Mercury, Jupiter, Uranus. Oh boy, are we seeing some repetitions here? Now these are the ones that out of the 912 are scoring the highest. And these are the vibrations that are scoring. These are the combinations that are scoring. Jupiter, Uranus, and Jupiter, Neptune. Jupiter, Uranus repeats 3 times. Right? And then you've got combinations with Mercury, and then you do have the Mercury, Saturn, Pluto. That's what I was wondering about, whether it wouldn't be just Moon, Saturn, Pluto. Okay, let me go on and show you another one. So here I thought I'm going to look at the 11th vibration octaves. So I'm looking just at 11, 22, and 33. And of course, as you saw in the earlier graphs, you know, I also looked at 44, 55, 65, all the way up. But this is still so helpful because, as I say, the list is yay long. I'm only going to look at what comes up at the top. And what do we see in the 11th vibration, the vibration of instability, restlessness? Jupiter, Neptune, Pluto, number 1. Sun, Neptune, Pluto in the 33rd. Mars, Saturn, Neptune. Sun, Jupiter, Uranus. Mars, Saturn, Neptune. Moon, Mercury, Mars. Sun, Saturn, Pluto. Okay, all right. Oh boy. Jupiter, Neptune, Neptune, Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, Jupiter, Uranus, Saturn, Neptune. Is there a picture emerging? Do I have something? No, I thought. I am going to get this. And this is where, okay, this is where I started to really like stay up till 3 in the morning. I said, I'm going to nail this. I am going to take every 3-planet combination. I'm going to take every vibration. I'm going to score it. I'm going to go back to my early research. And as you can see, I started all these little notations. Where does every 3-planet combination, what vibration are they strong in? You know, I'm starting to I have pages and pages like this, okay? And I did the analysis in 7, 8, 5, 11, 13. I even found out that 8 for this particular research came out the highest. I think 11. And then there are competing strengths. When I say strengths, I mean strengths of the overall combinations, the overall vibrational sets. But really what we're looking for is what scores the highest within each vibrational set at the 3 octaves. Okay, this is me kind of going, okay? And this is me saying, I'm not, okay, I am really going to get it. Now, what were the numbers what were the dyads that were the strongest? What are the vibrations now that I know from doing the 3 planetary analysis that showed up the highest using my initial 2018 analysis, using my 2019 analysis? What's scoring up the highest? What are the, you know, this is me, okay? Here I am. I have pages and pages of this. And again, Uranus, Saturn, Jupiter, Uranus, Jupiter, Neptune, Moon, Jupiter, Moon, Saturn, Saturn, Jupiter, Neptune, only using the 912 people in my category 1. Okay, at one point I thought, okay, I might be starting to lose it here. These were my pages, the numbers. I'm going, okay, where is that? What was that? I'm going to get this. I'm going to get this. I'm going to get this. I think maybe at one point I talked to David here and he said, Gisele, I think you're going a little manic. Just, you know, this was opposed to the other time where I said, David, I'm not doing this anymore. You know what? This is it. Okay, but this was where David said, okay, Gisele, it's all right. It's all right. Okay, well, listen, are we there yet? Do we have what we need to say we found the planets and the vibrations that correlate with bipolar disorder? Have we demonstrated without a doubt that people with bipolar disorder have these planetary combinations in their birth charts more often than other people? No. No. Oh, we're not there. No, we're not there. Okay. We're good. We're good, but we're not good enough. What we've done so far with exploratory research is we've mined the possibilities. With case studies, we've observed the charts of people with bipolar. Now, what we're going to do tomorrow, this is it, what we're going to do. We've got to determine whether the 912 charts in the Gauquelin database of people who have bipolar disorder fit signatures that we create from all of this exploratory research, and then we're going to create signatures for statistical significance. So now comes the really fun stuff. Get ready. Get ready for what you're going to see tomorrow. Thank you for being here. We do have a few more minutes for any questions that have come up if you want to ask me.
Okay. Yes, I have some questions for you. Are you ready?
I am.
Okay. So the first question comes from William, and he asks the clinical definition of mania.
Okay. Can I go back to show you? The slide is the clinical definition of mania. It's determined by a cluster of symptoms in the DSM-5 that requires that you have 3 out of about 7 symptoms that have to be actually verified by a psychopharmacologist who specializes in differential diagnosis. And those symptoms include mania, a manic state, meaning grandiosity, high talk. You know what? When you see this, if you have seen it, it's unmistakable. Do you want me to go back to the slide? It really wouldn't take that long, but you will see it.
If you want to set that one up, that's fine. He also had a follow-up question
Sure.
as to he was asking about the 77th. He saw that it was going through the different 11s, and then he asked why not the 77th 5 for the Jupiter-Neptune combination.
Let's look. That was great. Because the Jupiter-Neptune didn't come up high in the 77th vibration. Did I do a 77th in one of my case analyses? If I did,
I am not sure.
If
Yeah,
I
I'm
did,
not sure.
if I did, it's all exploratory. There's no preset calculation at this point. I'm just like exploring. But actually, in the Jupiter-Neptune that I initially did, it was the 7th. Oh, look, it was a 7. 7 and 21 came up high. In this particular one, 77 did not come up high, but when I looked at charts, in the end, we've got to put all the exploratory research together, right? It's only looking. There are no set conclusions, but I do want to get back just so that you can see what is going to, okay, here's manic depression. This is the criteria in the DSM-5 You have to have this criteria. You have to have 3. Now, if you tell me that you couldn't sleep last night or that yesterday you got on a roll, that's not mania. Okay. This has a very particular feel for it. And I hope that comes across clearly. But if you wanted to know what the definition is in the DSM-5, that's it.
Okay. All
It's
right.
Excellent answer, Giselle. Excellent explanation.
Yes. And yeah, in reading that, I all of a sudden realized I know a lot of manic people.
I have to just tell you, lots of people ask me if they're manic depressed, have bipolar disorder, because they do have highs and lows. But when you've worked with people, you know that it's not bipolar disorder. And I have to tell them, no, it's not bipolar disorder. Okay. So you get to see what the differential diagnoses are. So lots of, listen, when I experienced doing this, I thought, oh my God, am I getting bipolar disorder? I really, it was so extreme. Okay. Any more questions while we have time?
Yes. So Samuel asks, um, he says that let me read this right off his. So he asked about the numeric metrics. He said seems different from the experimental group and the control group. He mentions that one goes up to 60 and the other to 90. So he was just asking about that.
Gisele, do you want me to answer that?
I'm not sure. Can you answer it, David?
Yeah, I can answer it. There's 2 things to consider. Number 1, as Gisele has stated, this is exploratory research. She's just seeing what is revealed in the database. So we're not always looking at every fine, minute detail. She's looking at the themes, what's popping out. So it's the overall impression. That's one thing I want to emphasize. In tomorrow's lecture, she starts nailing this down, putting the screws in and tightening it up and getting statistical significance. But this is mostly to look. You have to go through this very laborious, tedious procedures. There's no skipping steps. And it's like Gisele said at the beginning, she thought this was dry statistics, and it ends up being the most intense emotional roller coaster of her life. You just become part of it. So that's one thing I want to say. The other thing I want to say is that the smaller the group of people, the more variability you get. So if you're looking at 900 people, there's going to be greater variability. It's random variability. If you're looking at 40,000 charts, there will be almost no random variability. It's like if I look at 20 people and see how tall they are, it's going to vary tremendously. But the more data you have, the more it averages out. And in some of the research that Gisele will describe tomorrow, she compares to the entire database of tens of thousands of people. So there's a lot of technical detail in how we're looking at this, but we don't really want to blow your minds with a lot of technical detail, because actually most of the research does not involve technical detail. It involves Gisele's incredible understanding of bipolar by being with these people year in and year out, working with hospital staff, working with psychiatrists, and getting inside the astrology. So I hope that helps answer the question. This is, okay, I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. There are no conclusions here. This is the whole point. This is the whole point. This is exploratory. Tomorrow morning, we're going to start putting together things. So, but you still may have very interesting and important questions to ask. And our time doesn't allow me to maybe give your answers the fullest explanation that you should have. So don't hesitate to contact me. And I'm really happy to explain further if you're left feeling like, I still have a question, right? So that's okay. And okay, I see my time is
Just
up.
one last question, Gisele.
Yep.
Very important question that Bob Leitner asked. Is schizophrenia the same as bipolar?
No, 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 no. It's not the same, but I will tell you something very interesting, but I don't think you should regard it as the same. First of all, let me tell you it's not the same. The symptoms are not the same. There is only one diagnosis, though, that can look the same. It's called schizoaffective diagnosis. Schizoaffective disorder is actually a combination of schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. Believe me, those people are hospitalized. It takes an expert to tease it apart. But if you're straight schizophrenia, the symptoms are different. They don't look like this. And the other thing is that, oddly enough, what they found, I'll just say in the gene study, is that it looks as though the genetic makeup is similar, but what emerges in the symptomology is quite different.
Thank you very much.
There was other little questions that had been asked that I think one is going to probably be answered tomorrow, and that was from Linda, where she's saying, is there a way to tell in the pattern if it will manifest positively or negatively?
Brilliant question. We're going to address it tomorrow. And
yes, we're out of time.
But that's a great question.
One more quick question on. There was one that Amanda asked about the nodes, the asteroids, the midheaven. Do you include any of that in your analysis?
No, not now. Not now.
Okay.
Not now, yeah.
Okay.
You know, I think what we want to do is limit the variability, because once you start to see the signatures, I mean, you've got to kind of say, this is what we're looking at. Now, I'm not saying we wouldn't look at it in the future, but right now, that's what we decided.
Awesome.
All
well,
right.
thank you, Gisele. That's been
Thank you.
I think it's been a wonderful demonstration also of the way vibrational astrology works, that this is an evidence-based astrology, and you're seeing how the evidence is being gathered and collected. And that was a wonderful demonstration and a massive tease for tomorrow. So, I mean, it'll be very interesting to see all the conclusions. You can see everything that Gisele's been doing and David to build this up, to find out what the answer is and the whole procedure that we go through. So, again, wonderful demonstration, a very good session here. So we'll be